It is haunted, right? I don't think the town has any clue what a treasure this place was or is. I mean, this is where three great authors lived. And Seton, he was an author. I mean, that's how he got his fame. That's why he bought this place. But he made his fortune writing books for kids. And so he gets enough money, and he gates off the 100 acres of farms that he bought in Costco. The problem is, the boys in town was the place where they played, like you play now, or played then. They start painting what he would call in his biography unspeakable things on his gates. Every day he'd send his gardener or one of his workmen out to scrub the gates, get the paint off, and the boys in Costco would pass, and they would laugh. Rather than call the police, right, after all the graffiti, he goes over to the school. He goes over to Costco school. He asks the teacher if he can speak to, like the upperclassmen. And so he says to them all, look, we've had some hard times between us, but I want you to come out to my property and let's bury the hatchet. You're going to come out for a weekend. We're going to play Indian. We'll have a campfire. You'll live in teepees. It'll be a grand time. Who's in? And slowly the boys are like, okay, we'll come. Easter weekend, 1902, they have an amazing time. He realizes he has a movement here. He begins to codify the rules for this organization. He'll call it, I think, Seton's Indians. It begins to catch like wildfire. It's like basically, it's early environmental education. Barbara Tuchman would finish The Guns of August in the cow barn under the white pine. Comes out in '62, and it catches the eye of Kennedy, right? It's an immediate bestseller, and because it's so well written, it's gripping. It's about the first 30 days of World War I. And it's about all the assumptions that the leaders had made. They make a lot of false assumptions. Once the machinery of war gets moving, it becomes impossible to stop. And that's kind of what Tuchman's writing about, and then just the horror of it. And it catches the eye of Kennedy, and Kennedy is just enthralled by it, a historian himself. He buys copies for the war colleges. He gives it to all of his chiefs of staff. And he's like, read this book. So when 6 months later, suddenly we discover missiles in Cuba, right? And all the chiefs of staff are saying, we have to take out those missile sites, Mr. President. And the president says, but, have you read the... And he says, well, what would the Russians do if we attack Cuba? And they said, well, of course they would invade West Berlin, but nobody would be that foolish, because then we would have to do a tactical nuclear strike on certain targets. And the president said, well, and what would the Russian response? Let's say they did, and we did have to respond with that tactical nuclear strike. What would happen? And they say, well, then the Soviets would be forced to, launch full-blown nuclear war. And so he says, did you read this book? He said, I don't want future historians writing the missiles of October, if there are any future historians. It's this book. It changes his mindset, right? And he forces the generals who are really angry with him for not letting them play war, and really he looks to his cabinet for an alternative solution, and that's where the blockade comes out, which allows the Russians leeway.